Florida, Georgia, folks. I shouldn't need to say anything else. And with David here, I make sure that I say it in the right order. That's Florida, Georgia. Yes, it always means something, even when it doesn't mean anything to the standings. But hey, Gators only 3-1 in the SEC, so they can catch Georgia with a win and have that head-to-head victory. We got David Waters here from Gators Breakdown to discuss. David, how you doing today?
Good, Mark. Good. Yeah, you said Florida, Georgia. For Florida fans, it is always Florida, Georgia, but Florida is the designated home team this year, so it is officially Florida, Georgia as well this year.
And for you, it's hate week.
Yes. I grew up in the state of Georgia. This one means more to me than all the other ones on the schedule, Mark. So, I know it depends on where you live, or maybe how old you are, but for most Gator fans, it's either Georgia or it's either Florida State. For me, it's not even really close.
Yeah, and this is what this sport is all about. It's about that clean hate, folks, that get offended. We're talking about sports hate, nothing serious, but hey, for those 3.5 hours, yes. And yeah, this Florida football team's 3-1 coming off an impressive comeback in the fourth quarter in which Graham Mertz had the offense on his shoulders and threw for 423 and had quite the fourth quarter. And Ricky Pearsall, of course, with the game-winning touchdown grab and all the big catches throughout the day, most of them, and a huge day for him. Is that just an aberration in what needed to happen against South Carolina, or do we expect a little bit more of a passing offense going forward?
Mark, that's the magic question. I mean, Florida had to do that. They were down 10 in the fourth quarter, and Graham Mertz had to put the offense on his shoulders. And look, that was even a question. Could he, in a scenario where he needed to, put the offense on his back, carry the team, and go in? And look, his passing numbers have been okay up to that point against South Carolina. His completion percentage has been really high, but not necessarily pushing the ball down the field all that much. But South Carolina played a lot of man coverage, gave Florida a lot of looks where if you wanted to go deep, you could go deep. And Florida went deeper, and Graham Mertz went deeper in that game, more so than they had in the past. And it pays off for a big come-from-behind victory in the fourth quarter there. But, now can he translate that? Can he translate that into a performance against Georgia? And, Mark, you go and look at the last few quarterbacks that have beaten Georgia. Look, not many losses on their schedule the last couple of years, but it's been your Joe Burrow, your Kyle Trask, your Mac Jones, your Bryce Youngs that have beaten Georgia. Nobody's putting Graham Mertz in that category, I don't think so. But, can he come anywhere close to put Florida in a position to win this game? So you look, and maybe Georgia's weakest parts of their defense is, quote unquote weakness of their defense, maybe stopping the run at times this year. And Florida's got a good stable of backs, but I think we know, Mark, Graham Mertz is going to have to go out there and play well, and not turn the ball over. He hasn't so much so far this year. I think it's 200, off the top of my head, 207 attempts, I think, now, without an interception for him. So he's going to have to go out there, play well, at times carry this offense. And you hope what he did versus South Carolina was kind of a precursor to what the Florida offense can be the rest of the season. Hey, look, it may not come about versus Georgia. That's how good they can be. But when you look at the rest of Florida's schedule, hopefully the South Carolina game was some kind of hint of what this Florida passing attack can be.
Billy Napier made a lot of big statements after that win against South Carolina. It almost sounded like they were playing Tennessee or Georgia or somebody else. Was it really that big of a win, or was it more so we couldn't lose that game? We can't lose to South Carolina at home. He was making a lot of big statements about this is why you come to Florida. This was a statement win. This was a big win. And I don't know that he said statement win. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he made some bold statements about how big of a win this was.
Mark, in a lot of ways, it was just because Florida has struggled on the road. And that's where a lot of the exhale moment came out of Florida coming back from 10 points down and winning that game. It wasn't necessarily you beat South Carolina. It was, Florida has found ways to lose road games. They had all the momentum in the world last year coming off of the Georgia game. You beat Texas A&M. You pound South Carolina only to go on the road and lose versus Vanderbilt, not be able to keep the momentum, and then take the road games this year as well. Utah did not look great. Kentucky did not look great. Florida just needed to go and put a good performance out there in a win on the road. So it was more about, kind of getting rid of those bad memories of road game performances so far this year. Going there and getting a road victory. And look, both teams probably desperate at that point. Florida, South Carolina at that time, both teams fighting for bowl eligibility with the rest of the schedule for both teams moving forward. It was desperation game for both teams in some ways. So I think Florida, it was mostly about going out there and getting a road victory, proving that they can do it.
I don't want to put too much on this South Carolina game because, again, it's more about how the team is trending in various units, and so the defense obviously didn't have its best day. But overall, what are your thoughts about the defense's development?
Yeah, they are a better defense than they were, Mark. Probably not as good as it looked versus Tennessee. They played out of their minds that night versus Tennessee in the Swamp. And, of course, the 90,000 screaming Gator fans help in that regard as well. But the performance against Kentucky is in a lot of people's minds, giving up some big plays versus South Carolina as well. They'd settled down. I mean, South Carolina had some big rushes early in that game. It did settle down, but it was a lot of losing a one-on-one passing battles down the field where South Carolina's receivers made plays and Florida's defensive backs did not. Giving up explosive plays has been Austin Armstrong's calling card, even as defensive coordinator days at Southern Miss. That has continued here at Florida. A much better third down defense if they can get teams into third down. That's kind of been the problem. A lot of success on first and second down for some of these teams. So maybe this bye week, Florida, first of all, good timing on the bye week. Florida needed to get healthy at the linebacker spot. Shamar James, Scooby Williams, Taraja Mitchell's been beat up. There was a really good timing there for the linebackers. But more importantly, Billy Napier mentioned it in his Monday press conference before the Georgia game is they do have to get more discipline up front. Their gap scheme, they're on the edges where they've let those big runs against Kentucky happen, when they let those big runs versus South Carolina happen. So he said they spent 3 days last week during the bye week of trying to fix the issues that the Florida needs to worry about. Don't worry about Georgia. Don't worry about South Carolina. Don't worry about what Kentucky did. We need to figure out what we need to do, what we need to get better at moving forward. So maybe Georgia doesn't take advantage of you the same way those other teams did. So Florida did on the defensive side of the ball, Mark, went back up to a lot of fundamentals and kind of figuring out themselves out. They are a better defense, but now, with this stretch run coming in November, they really need to elevate their level of play.
Georgia's a better football team. We know that. That doesn't mean they're going to win the game, though. And we've seen them struggle against teams that are in that similar category with Florida. So everybody wants to see Georgia play an elite team, but that's not going to happen for quite a long time. So here they go against another Auburn, South Carolina. Those were real struggles. Now, Kentucky, they're in that same class, and they were focused, and they came out, and maybe they woke up in that game. On the other hand, rarely a great player is a great player at any position, but rarely do we believe that losing a tight end, unless it's like a Kyle Pitts from a few years ago, is going to make a big difference. But Brock Bowers is just simply that good, and you take him out of that offense, and you see where that team has struggled and had to pull games out in the fourth quarter, and it has to give you some hope.
Yeah, but Mark, it certainly, makes the gap a little smaller. And that doesn't mean Georgia can't go out there and still win by 3 touchdowns. Of course they can, but it does give a little even more sliver of a hope for Florida to maybe stay in this game and maybe pull it out at the end. And Mark, you mentioned, you probably look at Georgia's struggles this year, besides that South Carolina game where they got down 14-3 at home and stormed back to win that game. They had some struggles away from Athens at Auburn. That's a tough place to play. This past week against Vanderbilt, probably not their best performance either, but they put together a performance and kind of ran away from that game, ran away from Vanderbilt in the fourth quarter of that game. But looking at Florida too, not great performance away from the Swamp. So with Carson Beck and at quarterback, and now having to figure out how do you make up for the loss of Brock Bowers. We can say, I think we know they do have plenty of options. Their ground game's getting better. Do they lean on the ground game a little bit more? Do they rely on some of the skill players that they still have there? But now it's prove it. You got to go out there and prove it. Yes, they have options. Yes, they have different ways to make up for it. But, how's the game going to play out to where they need to rely on one of those scenarios? And, is it going to be as easy if it's a close third quarter, fourth quarter game, if the security blanket, if the safety blanket for Carson Beck's not there in the name of Brock Bowers? Can they successfully pivot to another, way of playing late in the game when it's tight? So, there's a you can certainly say Georgia has plenty of options, but you still got to see it come to fruition when that. And look, when you lose one of the best players in the country, Mark, you don't get better. Can you adjust? Sure, but you don't get better. So this is their first test in figuring out how they can go about putting an offensive game plan together without Brock Bowers.
Fortunately for them, Ladd McConkey, who was missing for most of the season, came back 2 or 3 weeks ago. So he is pivotal in that receivers room. And Oscar Delp is obviously a guy that was highly recruited, but doesn't have, that production as of yet. Hate week. So for you, you kind of outlined why it's different for you. Why is it different for the typical Gator?
For this one, I mean, this year, I mean, look,
Yes.
Mark, this is Georgia. I mean, this is your in-conference rival. They're the top-ranked team in the country. You have a chance to go beat the number one team in the country. Forget that it's Georgia. I mean, you have a chance to go beat the number one team in the country right now. And Florida's, as an unranked team, they would be 26 in the AP, so they're one spot away, but they technically are unranked. Have never beaten a number one team as an unranked team. Florida's beaten the number one team, of course, but just never as an unranked team. So they could get that. Mark, I mean, trivia time. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Georgia's last regular season loss.
It was against that Kyle Trask 2020 team. Yeah.
Right. So it's been a while. You can even say, well, maybe Georgia's due for a regular season loss somewhere. And Florida fans are saying, hey, well, why not us? Why not us? So look, it's a rivalry game. You're playing the number one team in the country. You're looking for ways this program is taking steps under Billy Napier. Look, there's a lot of things you can point to. Yes, they are getting better in a lot of areas. But if you want to build some equity, if you want to make it even higher, go out there and beat the number one team. I mean, Florida's got a very, very tough schedule to finish the season out, Mark. They have Georgia, they have Missouri, they have LSU, FSU. I mean, that's 4 teams to end the season, all in the top 16 of the rankings right now, and throw in Arkansas at home. So it won't be an easy ending for this season for Florida, but you can build a whole lot of equity by getting one more win and getting bowl eligible, but also beating your most hated in-conference rival and the number one team in the country.
And I'm not going to let you get me started on rankings, but I've got a full dissertation on rankings and why they drive me crazy, and that Florida's number 26. Well, they actually are number 26 because there's absolutely nothing different about Florida being at 26 than the other team being at 25. It's the same process of voting. They just choose to stop the list at 25.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
All right. So they're an unranked team. All right. So we got David Waters here, Gators Breakdown. It is the best place to be for Florida football coverage. So whether you're a Florida fan, which if you know who David is, if you're a Florida fan and you're watching me, I don't think there's any question about that. But love the SEC, college football, want to keep up with the top brands. Gators Breakdown. It's right here on YouTube or your favorite audio platform. And this is a big deal in regards to recruiting, of course. So
yeah, Mark. I mean, Florida just had a big battle win over Georgia this past weekend. LJ McCray, 5-star defensive lineman out of Daytona, Mainland. Florida, Georgia, FSU battle here toward the end of his recruitment, and Florida gets him, Mark. And I mean, we've talked recruiting over the years and how much it means for Florida and how much it meant to keep an in-state 5-star type of talent away from Georgia, away from Alabama, away from Ohio State. All these schools have raided Florida over the last few years. It's got to stop at some point. If you're Florida State's in Miami, want to get back, and you're starting to see trending in the direction of these in-state schools doing a little bit better in in-state recruiting. And for Florida, it was getting this big win over those type of schools with LJ McCray. 6'6", 6'7" Mark, about 270 pounds. I mean, he towers over everybody when you sit and look at these, highlights on Huddle or whatever. I mean, of course, Mark, you sit there and watch those, and hey, look, they put that little circle around players or whatever. You don't need that circle when you're watching LJ McCray, because he just towers over everybody. He's very disruptive force. He's constantly in the backfield, which would, you would expect that to be at his size at the high school level. But Mark, I mean, he's gotten, his head coach has given him the Javon Curse label. I mean, if Javon Curse, what his production was at Florida, whether it be on the edge as a rusher or whether it be a traditional defensive lineman, you have a versatile defensive lineman that's just able to go out there and take over games. And that's what he's been able to do at the high school level, and what Florida wants him to do, of course, at the next level. So, Mark, I think you're getting somebody who, at that size already can come in and play as a young guy. Florida's already proven this year with a Kelby Collins and a TJ Searcy good recruited, highly recruited guys, they'll go out there and play them, and those guys have done well so far. But you put one at this size again, I could see where, next year he's playing as a true freshman as well. So big in-state win over your rivals, Mark, and also a guy that I think can be an instant impact for the Gator defense next year.
Folks, there's a reason the Gators Breakdown is a mainstay in Apple's top 50 list of best college football and most popular college football podcasts. So get there to Gators Breakdown, whether it be on YouTube or the audio version as well. We would enjoy it if you would like this video and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football as well. David, enjoy the game if you can. Hopefully things work out. And there's a 14-point dog that pulls off an upset in Jacksonville on Saturday. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Mark.